But there's new legislation. No, she has to be. No, that's right.
All right, we're going to get started in the afternoon session, and I'm very happy to see Minister Ian Bushy and Minister Moses are both in attendance. So I'm going to open up the opportunity for them to come up and speak in regards to, why we're here today. And then after that, Kathy Mary, Grand Chief Kathy Mary of AMC is not here, but I think she sent a representative to speak on her behalf. I'm not sure which chief.
Muniaz. Chief Muniaz.
Chief Muniaz? Okay. And then Chief Garrison said he's here as well. Grand Chief Garrison said he, and Grand Chief Jerry Daniels is also here. And they both have words and statements to make as well this afternoon. So, I don't know. Ian? Minister Moses? Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you. Come here.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Minister Jamie Moses. I'm the Minister of Economic Development, Investment, Trade, and Natural Resources, and I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon speaking to all of you and having the opportunity to bring greetings to you all on behalf of the province of Manitoba and on behalf of Premier Canoe. We are very thrilled to be in this position over the last couple of months, getting familiar with our portfolios and with the role of being in government. I think one of the key things that we've learned, and that I've specifically learned over the past few weeks and months, is the importance of listening and continuing to engage and being responsive to communities like yours that are play a very impactful role in the fabric of what makes Manitoba, the great place that it is. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make a point to be here today, to not only represent the province here, the Premier, but also to show that I myself and our department is trying to do our best to listen and to engage and to be part of what makes up the commercial landscape for hunters and for fisher people and for the people who do this work and are involved in these sectors in our industry, make it a better place to do business here in Manitoba. And so as we continue to work to get our feet settled and formulate how we are going to work best in partnership and collaboratively with all of you folks, we want to also make sure that you guys are aware, and you're all aware, that our government takes that responsibility very seriously, to be partners and to be responsive to these issues. We know specifically under my portfolio that Crown land is a major issue and legislation that deals with that. We also know that we have to deal with moose management policy and making sure that we're being respectful of that process as well. But we also know that we want to make sure that that all that we do when it comes to hunting is being respectful of rights, and being also respectful of how we ensure that our industry and can grow our economies in Manitoba and that people can engage with them, in a good way across our province, and also that we're being good stewards of the natural resources that we all have and that we all share in Manitoba. And so considering some of those factors and using the expertise that we have within our departments, and also being able to leverage the experience that you all have through the many years of being involved in your sectors. Not only that, but your experience you have being involved in your communities and in your nations. I think that we can come to some good places on some of those files that are important to all of you. And so my door is open in terms of having these conversations. We continue to remain a listening government. And I want to make sure that in addition to bringing greetings today to all of you on behalf of the province, that all of you feel comfortable talking to me and knowing that you'll have a listening ear with being able to have a good conversation moving forward. And so I want to once again thank you for having me here today to speak to you. And just to introduce myself so that we can start off, I can start my role in this role, my position in this role, in a good way, and getting to know you on a positive foot. That way we can have constructive and collaborative conversations and partnership into the future. So thank you very much for your time today. Very much.
I just want Minister Moses and Minister Bushy to understand why we're here today. And I guess one of the biggest reasons why we're here and why we wanted to host this is that so that you could understand the impacts of our treaty in Aboriginal rights, especially since 2016 when the Palliser government took charge of this province and how we've been impacted. And a couple of people in the audience said, well, if the ministers arrived, why did you ask this question? So I'm going to ask this question. You know, I want people in the audience here that have been impacted in dealing with conservation officers as they executed their right to harvest, whether it be in the night or day, if they've been charged, and if you felt that you've been treated wrongly by the conservation officers since 2016 till today, or fishers that have been charged for road slips or whatever it may be, of being a couple of pounds of over their limit when it comes to their harvest. You know, I want you to stand up in this room. Please stand up if you've been impacted by the previous government officials in execution of their duties and taking away our rights. We need to know. Not everybody can come up here and speak, but we need to know the people that have been impacted and why we're here today, so that this province and the ministers see the impacts to our people that have been brought upon by the previous regime, and that these ministers work with us when we talk about reconciliation to move forward in a good way. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Yes. I'll call upon Minister Ian Bushy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. As Mike mentioned, my name is Ian Bushy. I'm the Minister for Municipal Northern Relations and Indigenous Economic Development. But first and foremost, I'm also a proud member of the Hollow First Nation. I'd like to thank Mike for the invitation. Outside of seeing him on the baseball diamond, seeing Chief Catchway also on the baseball diamond, this is a very good forum to be able to have discussions in. And I appreciate the question, Mike, to kind of start us off. Mike's a lot shorter than everybody else here, so I'm going to grab the mic like this. I know some folks stood up, maybe some folks didn't stand up, but at the end of the day, everybody in this room could have stood up in some capacity. And if you noticed, I also stood up. So my dad is a commercial fisher himself, 85 years old in December, and he's still actively commercial fishing to this day. So he's been affected by things over the past years as well. It also goes back to previous governments as well, previous NDP governments. So for us sitting here today, and I've had the opportunity and the privilege to be able to talk in these rooms as well. Prior to me being an MLA, I was a chief of my community in Hollow as well, where we discussed a lot of these issues and we addressed a lot of these issues and we brought them forth. And in some capacity, some things were dealt with and resolved, maybe not entirely. And some issues are still issues today. And some issues have gotten worse over these last, especially over this past term of the PC government. So for us to be able to have discussions here on behalf of not only myself, but our cabinet and our premier, Wab Canoe, we also had these discussions as opposition. So I had, and I will say that was maybe a good thing that I first became involved in provincial politics in opposition. It gave me the chance to kind of see exactly the inner workings of the government and how it went, and also to now then bring in the issues that I brought forth. Because people ask me time and time again, why did I decide to run? Why did I decide to run for provincial politics? And I decided to run for provincial politics to make a difference, and specifically to make a difference for our people and our communities. So my constituency, Kuwatnuk, is the southernmost community is Segi, goes all the way up to Shimatawa. So all the Island Lake, all the southeast communities. And it's geographically the largest constituency in the province, but at the same time, it's one of the poorest constituencies in the province. So those are gaps that we need to close, and that's primarily the reason why I also ran for politics, is to close the gaps that exist between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, on reserve, off reserve, to be able to work together. So specifically, in looking at the agenda that we had here today, it's around fishing, it's around hunting, and it's around inherent rights. It's around the right to hunt for sustenance, and the right to also create economic development in your communities. Because you very well know that fishing in your communities is an economic driver. And those of you that are fishers today, it's also because your parents, your grandparents were also fishers. And hopefully your children and your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will continue to be fishers as well. So we're here as a government, and it's a commitment that we make as well, and the premiers make, to work as a partner. Not to work with a government kind of dictating how things go, but to work in partnership, in collaboration with. And not just to say those are things that we're going to be able to do for the buzzwords of collaboration, partnership, reconciliation, but actually put some bite into that. So it's a true partnership, a true collaboration, and we're really working together. Because when it gets into your communities, I don't know what's best in your communities. Nobody in government knows what's best in your communities. You know what's best in your communities because you live it each and every day. So you see the impacts that decisions made, whether it be a federal government or provincial government, you see those decisions that are affecting you each and every day. So how can we best address those concerns? And it's working together. So as a former chief, as I mentioned, there's been issues that were, when I sat at those tables as well, when I sat on that side of the table, if you will, there was a lot of things that we wanted to be able to see addressed. Some were, some weren't. But now we have the opportunity to be on both sides of that table as well as Indigenous people here in Manitoba, to work in collaboration and true partnership. So when we talk about fishing, it's about talking together. It's about working together. It's about how do we best do things together. So one of the things that I had heard, and we had talked about previously, and I see Sam Murdoch here as well, was about committees. Setting up a committee of, let's say, a disciplinary advisor committee. Because those are things that we would like to see established as well. And I think that's something that's being driven by the communities as well. So it's not always about enforcement. It shouldn't always be about enforcement when it comes to natural resources and traditional territories. It should be about working in collaboration with. So let's do things that we work together on. Because there's still issues, there's still issues that within your own communities, within your own circles, where maybe disciplinary things need to be addressed as well. But let's work on that together. Let's work in conjunction with. And we shouldn't have things kind of a top-down approach, a very paternalistic approach where government says, no, this is what it is. So when I stood up about the fishing issue, that's what hit me. That's what hit my family. That what hit my dad as an 80-plus-year-old fisher being suspended for fishing. And that's his livelihood. So those are things we want to be able to work together on. We want to be able to work in collaboration with. Because when at the end of the day, it's and this is really awful to say, but it's a dying industry, and it shouldn't be. It's a huge economic driver for your communities, but also for the entire province and for the country. Commercial fishing is a big proponent and a big economic opportunity for us, not only for employment, but for what it means for your community, what it helps for the cost of living, the affordability in your communities. But we have to be able to work together with it. We have to be able to work, again, I'm going to say this word many, many times, collaboration. Because every community, while there's a lot of issues that are the same, we're also very unique. So something that may be the status quo in Norwood House is not necessarily the status quo down in Hallwater. But there's issues that we have common kind of messaging on, but there's other issues that are unique to your communities. So we need to be able to have those conversations as well. And that's in regards to fishing, but we also get into regards to hunting. Because at the end of the day, or I should say at the beginning of the day, the first stewards or environmentalists of this land is everybody here, and your ancestors, your parents, and your grandparents. So why would you not count and call in an expertise to be able to say what serves us going forward? Because I believe in thinking 7 generations ahead. So my great-great-great-grandchildren have something, have natural resources, have sustainability, have fishing, have hunting. So we need to work together to be able to do those. So in my former role as a chief, I really took the inability, if you will, of the duty to consult. It shouldn't just be a box that government checks off to say we've had this. Okay, we've had this meeting, I've now consulted with everybody here. That's not true, and that shouldn't be the case. So the duty to consult that we have is a commitment that we're making going forward. Because in opposition, I called on the PC government each and every day to formalize a duty to consult. While there is, again, something very broad across everybody, there's very specific issues for each community and each territory. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that we talk about reserves and the reserve boundaries, but more importantly, we talk about the traditional territories. Because that's where you live and you reside, where you maintain your livelihood. Because we have that ability in all over Manitoba. We are a real have province in Manitoba. We have very natural resources from coast to coast to be able to do those kind of things in Manitoba. But the world is going to come for things that we have here in Manitoba. So we have to be able to establish things in place that allows us to survive, that allows us to live, but also allows us to thrive. And that's our commitment that we make as government as well, is to have those discussions with the communities, have those discussions with the individuals, have those discussions. If you've heard the word frontline over the course of the pandemic, it's been synonymous with healthcare workers. But the front line of Manitoba, front line of fishing, front line of hunting is in this room. And those are conversations that I want to have. I want to have those conversations with the front line of fishing, with the front line of hunting, with the front line of Indigenous communities and First Nation communities. Because that's where those true collaborations, true partnerships, true decisions that we want to make going forward. And that's our commitment as well. And that's a commitment that, on behalf of the Premier, that I've also been tasked with. But we also didn't need to be tasked with that as government. We didn't need to have the Premier say, make sure we do this. As us and our entire cabinet and our entire caucus, for that matter, we knew the issues going forward. We knew the issues that Indigenous communities face going forward. We don't know them all, but at the same time, we know we want to hit the ground running to be able to deal with this. So hitting the ground running also calls sometimes for some patience. And as Indigenous communities, we've been very patient for a lot of years. So it's hard to ask to be patient. But these are things that, in reading the agenda, and I know there's even specific cases within the agenda that over the course of time, those are going to be dealt with. So we get it right. We get it right going forward. So we're not all about discipline and kind of butting heads. We're working together hand in hand going forward for the sustainability of hunting, the sustainability of fishing, but the sustainability for your communities as well. And that's the commitment I make here as well. So for me, I've been, with my portfolio, has been about the duty to consult as well. And whether or not we call it the duty to consult, or whether we call it something different, because the term duty to consult hasn't worked well for our communities over the last 2 terms of this previous government. So we look at something going forward in terms of a comprehensive consultation policy, and we do that going forward. I've also been tasked with TLE as well, so those processes as well, and we've already began those discussions as to how we can best expedite that process. So on behalf of our cabinet and our premier, I look forward, and I'm going to be sticking around for the Q&A as well, because I'm truly engaged with what they have. And if I was on that side of the table, I'd have a ton of questions as well, and rightfully so. So going forward, I look forward to this engagement, and I know this is the first of many, many conversations that we'll have as a group, but also as we'll have as individuals in your communities as well. So again, thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to hearing how the afternoon goes. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Minister Bushy. So now we're going to call upon our esteemed Grand Chiefs to come up and say a few words, But I just want to stress how important it is that they listen to what we have to say, and that, our ministers understand this is just the first of many other meetings to come. And I met Minister Moses at a mining conference in early November. And I kind of went up to him, and he's just looking at me, and I was telling him about this meeting, and that there's some really contentious issues that we have to deal with and that you have to hear. And I said, a perfect example is Crown land, and how that legislation is taking away our rights to hunt, to gather, and so on. And that legislation has to be repealed, because if it's not, you're going to see class actions against the province throughout Indian country in southern Manitoba, because we'll have nowhere to hunt. And NRTA, even though it's not a good document, Section 13 makes sure that we have that place to hunt. Our treaties, each of our treaty areas ensure that we have that place to hunt. So the ministers have to ensure that, we're not going to sit idly no more. And the impacts to our people have been gone on long enough. And the show of solidarity here today in this room is just absolutely amazing, to see all the people that are here, and to show the ministers and our leaders that it's important to us, our treaty and Aboriginal rights, our way of life, to protect what's rightfully ours, the use of the land. I'll share one little story with you, how legislation really impacts our people. In 1995, the Fisherman government implemented the hog operation industry to this province. And they started expropriating land throughout the rural municipalities of Manitoba and building these huge hog barns. But there was really no legislation or policy to mandate and watch it the way it should be. So the rural municipalities south of us would spread their manure in the winter on the land. And it'd be sitting in the snow. And south of us is the arm of Bifrost and the arm of Fisher. And those communities are 200 feet higher than the arm of Peguis and Fisher River. Right? And that pig shit would come down in the springtime with snow, and would get into our water table. And all of a sudden, mothers were starting to lose babies at full maturity when they were pregnant at 9 months through a thing called blue baby syndrome. We don't know how much, we're still investigating. Dozens, maybe hundreds. And the mothers didn't know what was going on, and a lot of the times it was being kept quiet. We have an elder in our community that used to monitor the water, Leonard Kipling, and he brought this to our attention, and the health director, and we've been working on this for 3 or 4 years now. But that legislation was killing our unborn children in our community through a thing called blue baby syndrome. And there's only one cause of blue baby syndrome, and that's nitrates in the water. And the Doer government 2007 shut down the hog operation industry for spreading manure and expanding. But in 2017, the Conservative government again opened up that industry with another legislation for more expansion. So we're doing the research to try and fight this, because we could be back to where we were in 95, and where this legislation would just kill our unborn children in our community. And our women are deadly afraid to come forward because they didn't know what was happening at that time. They didn't know what the cause of it was. And this is because of legislation without consultation, without notification, without community engagement. And that's the impacts that we have to see today and knowing what happened in the past. You know, like I talked about earlier, you see, look at legislation is settler-based, the United States and Canada to eradicate the Plains Indians. Well, it's still doing that today. And that's what we have to change. That's what we have to advocate to our ministers for, our leaders, to make those changes. And no more advisory committees. I sit on the Interlake Conservation District. We sit there in advisory capacity. We don't have a vote, so what good is that? We have to have the authority to change legislation, to share in the resource management practices of this province, to ensure that our people are looked after properly, and legislation is done based on our opinions and our views as well. So with that, I'll call upon Grand Chief Kathy Merrick. I know she can't make it, but Chief Monias, yeah, he's going to come and say a few words in regards to Assembly Manitoba Chiefs. Chief.
Thank you, Mike.
Merci. Tabiskat na nga no. Letam score. Lagi atik. Lagi atik. Kikse ganun sa kikse pak. Emes tamagwa. Mens tailog. Isto skog. Kitiatsak minagan ginon tagayek. Kamatsyak. Pagatoyek. Hoyo. Epi mista mo epi gatsabat ya Francis epi pigus kan precis nistota. Eutsi petote. Rama David Monias Niason kibao emetsa kamagotsa. Robina yo kimagan cross lake bandits. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here on behalf of Grand Chief Kathy Merrick, who couldn't be here. First of all, I acknowledge the pipe, the parents, the elders did, and also the women, the children, all the men that are celebrating the Aboriginal Indigenous Ribbon Skirt Day and National Day today. So I wanted to acknowledge that. And I wanted to say my name is David Monias. I'm the Chief of the Nation for Pimetsikamak. I'm also Chief for Cross Lake Band of Indians. We are a sovereign nation and we believe in our natural law. That's what we follow. And I had to write a few notes quickly when I was asked to speak. So we acknowledge the pipe and the elders and the women and the men and the children who celebrate the National Indigenous Ribbon Skirt Day today. And I acknowledge all of you. And the elders stated today that we come here not to pick a bone with the government, but to bring awareness and education regarding our Indigenous Constitution and the pipe ceremony about our way of life. The pipe ceremony is to communicate with our Creator by smoking the pipe and praying for the Minute and acknowledge the natural law gifted to us by our Creator. The natural law includes our right to hunt, trap, fish, and harvest from our lands and waters. And there's all that in those spear pickers like those guys over there. I want to talk a little about the NRTA and also the Constitution of Canada, Section 35. You know, they say that they recognize our Aboriginal rights. But in our view, these are racist laws and regulations that we have to follow. And any provincial legislation that's been created are actually racist towards us because they prohibit us and limit us in terms of what we can do. So I was asked to speak about that because we ourselves believe in the natural law because we don't separate ourselves from the land or the water. We are part of it. We are part of natural law. So anything that happens within our lands and our waters includes us. Has a right to hunt, to trap, to fish, to harvest resources, and yes, cherry picking included. All those things we have a right to do is part of our treaty right. Our treaties that we sign with the Canadian government representatives that represent the Crown of England, the King and the Queen of England. Those are covenant documents that are in place. They were there to protect our inherent rights, but also to protect our Aboriginal rights, because we were here first since time immemorial. Other people claim to be that, but we know that's not true. It is the Indigenous people in Inuk, Nisnabek, Nisnapenyuk. Those are the original inhabitants. They've been here since time immemorial, before anybody else. And we fished, we hunted, we trapped, we harvested from our land, because it was our God-given right. Treaties are supposed to protect our Aboriginal rights and inherent rights. They cannot be terminated even though they are being breached by the Canadian government and Manitoba government. Agreements, much like the Northern Flood agreements, we consider to be treaties. They are here forever. They will never be terminated either. They're supposed to protect our rights and our Indigenous people. The right of first priority to hunt, trap, fish, and harvest in our treaty territories. In our territories, no other person is supposed to hunt or harvest in our resources without our consent. Now, Manitobans elected the first Indigenous person to be the Premier. And that's a sign of reconciliation, and we now need to implement the treaties. But they also elected some ministers. You know, not just to listen. We have a lot of people listening to us. We need commitments. We need action that includes us in our conversations. We always stated this. Anything about us without us will not work, right? Following natural law includes preservation and protection in a responsible manner, but as keepers of the land and waters, we must be included. It must be recognized that we harvest resources from our lands for sustenance to feed our families and community members. It is for the benefit of our people, our communities, and our nations. We cannot be licensed or permitted by non-Indigenous governments but by our own laws. Therefore, we shouldn't be fined exercising our right to hunt, trap, fish, and harvest from our lands and our waters. For us, as stated before, we're not out there for sport or trophies to hang on our wall. We exercise our harvesting rights for self-sustenance. We thought that Manitoba and Canada, the Bibit-Sikamak, were honoring the treaties when they signed the Northern Flood Agreement. But they continue to violate these treaties by permitting license to non-Indigenous people to hunt, fish, and harvest our resources from lands and waters. People come there from the States, from all over, and they go in the waters with no regard for our fish nets. They go right through them like nothing. They destroy the nets. Manitoba and hydro, they fluctuate the land. That affects the moose, the deer, the fish, all the animals, get affected. And their academics blame things on the people who hunt, fish, and trap. They say it affects the ecosystem. But it's actually the other way around. It's actually the guy that was here, Moses. I think he's gone already. Is he gone?
Yeah.
I thought he was here to listen.
I told him one story and he covered it.
But that's what I mean. We need these people to stay here. They got to stay here. to listen, not to say that they're listening, right? But economic development from the provincial side destroys our land, destroys our ecosystem. We talked about the peat moss affecting the moose and the deer. It affects the coyotes, it affects the wolves, right? All these things, all these developments that are happening, yes, it's happening more rapidly in the south, but it's coming up north as well. It's affecting us, all the mining industries, the hydro developments, and all these other things are affecting us. You know, we used to be able to, there's very few places you can do actually with a cup and take some water out the water and to drink it. Only a few places are like that now left. But that's what they're doing to our land. They say, well, we'll give you running water. Well, our fish still have to live in the water. Our animals still have to drink the water, and we have to eat those animals, you know. And they don't even think about that, right? Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. But anyways, in the Northern Flood Agreement, the emphasis is the promise set out in Article 15.3 of the Northern Flood Agreement. To the effect that the Manitoba has encouraged and will continue to encourage the residents of reserves to achieve the maximum degree of self-sustenance in food supplies and to maximize the opportunity to earn income and income in kind from the wildlife resources, will therefore prohibit hunting, trapping, fishing in the resource area by non-resident of the reserve who does not have the present right of law to carry on these activities in the resource area. You know, but they do not honor these agreements or the treaties to this day, and we know that. And that must change. The time is now to honor and implement the treaties and agreements as part of our reconciliation. We must take action now together. Minister, take that message back. We have to. You have to listen to these guys here, the ladies that are here. Because our livelihood has been affected and it's destroying our people. A lot of my people live in Winnipeg, Thompson, other areas because they're of diabetes. They have to rely on dialysis and other health issues. Back in the days, you know, former chief, but also as our Indigenous person who was a rights holder also, our people did not experience that before. Before people, non-Indigenous people came here. Because that food was really nourishing and good for our people. We were not eating fat, salt, sugar, you know. Our people were strong back then. I still remember going hunting with my grandfather, and he pulled a snow machine up a hill with one hand and the other hand on another tree. He was 65 years old and fully loaded. And you know, me as a little guy there trying to help him push it up. But he was very strong. I still see those men that, you know, most of them are gone now. But I still see a lot of people here that are like that here. And with that, I thank you for listening to us. I know I'm listening to you guys, and I know I'm fighting for the rights of our people. You know, I will continue to be the voice of my people, for my men, my women, my children. You know, I'll fight for our lands and our waters. I'll stand with you, beside you, in front of you, behind you if you need me. And I know Francie and Merrick will as well too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Monias. I'd like to call Grand Chief Garrison Sethi up. Congrats, Garrison. Thank you.
Autensi, tema kitsanag nas commit now anuts kaginaw dilichi ya anuts kitsi one yani mutsi take tabskat now Nas principio samit iguta. Wap mitaguguta iskentaman emusita yeg. Tewa ta sisi. Ako kitimay gaw yeg. Kinaw pagitawag mina ayaw onigiyog. Pagkinanos kumit na ako. I'm very humbled to be here on Treaty 1 territory, and I want to acknowledge the Treaty 1 First Nations for allowing us to gather here, because this gathering is of utmost importance and significance to all of you that are here. I see around this room a lot of people that have been directly affected and impacted by legislation. And I know that you're here because you want to figure out a way forward. And there is a way forward. And at the end of the day, it's all about your right. Your inherent right. That's what we're talking about here. And in 1930, the provinces passed policies and legislation that compromised and caused your rights to be attacked, and attempted erosion of your right. And we are here because you deserve to be heard. Your stories need to be heard by governments, by us as leadership, because we are in a position to be able to lobby and advocate for your concerns. And it's long overdue. It's long overdue, but the time is now to create change and policy that will be accommodating of your inherent right to hunt, trap, and fish. So I'm very honored to be here, because I believe that everyone that is sitting in this room wants to see changes, that you don't have to be harassed by conservation officers anymore. You don't have to have your game confiscated by conservation because it is your inherent right that is constitutionally protected under Section 35 of the Constitution. And also the Supreme Court of Canada recognizes your right to be who you are as a hunter, trapper, and a fisherman. And here we are today still trying to fight to be recognized. But that day is coming that your rights and your ability to access your hunting territory, your trapping territory, without harassment by governments, because the government is here. The government representatives are here saying that they want to work with us. And the first things that need to change is the NRTA, the Natural Transfer Resource Agreement. That is a breach of your treaty. It has always been a violation of your treaty. We have to change that. And that change has to happen. If it doesn't change, we're going to be sitting around a table talking about our grievances and our concerns. And I'm here to represent the Mkele First Nations and to support them. 70% of northern Manitoba consists of indigenous people. And this includes hunters, trappers, and fishermen. And a small group of people dictate what happens in our territories. It's called apartheid. And we must do away with that kind of legislation. Our hunters and fishers have been crying for so long. We can no longer accept that a handful of people decide what happens to a majority, because we are the rights holders. We are the original inhabitants of this land, and our rights need to be respected, no longer ignored, no longer dismissed, and no longer impeded by legislation. So I'm thankful that Mr. Bushy is here, because we have work to do. And we're going to do it together.
Right on.
And we're going to work with this government. They say they want to work collaboratively. We must be at the table when it comes to hunting, trapping, and fishing, and gathering of medicine. We must be at that table.
Right.
And we're going to be there for you. We're going to be there for you. Because the time for change is now. The time for transformation is now. Because your rights have been severed. Your rights have been under attack. But we're going to stand together here. We're going to bind together and create a system where we are at the table. We belong at that table, not on the outside looking in. We deserve to be at that table. Our hunters and trappers and fishermen deserve to be heard. So today, as an organization, we are a lobbying organization. We do not speak on behalf of your sovereignty or your treaty rights, but nevertheless, I am a Treaty 5 signatory member. I'm from the Pimicikamakwi Nation. My grandfathers were trappers, hunters, and fishermen. My brothers still live on the land. They do that every day, and I have to lobby and fight to protect their rights. I myself am a merely berry picker, but I have a loud voice, and I know where the good spots are. But in my defense, I attempted to be a fisherman's helper for 1 year. And the man that hired me was over there, Norman Slade from Dauphin River. And after one season, I said, I'm going back to school. This is not for me. But it was a good experience. So anyway, I don't want to take too much time because I know there's a lot that needs to be said here, but one of the things we are concerned about is, as it was mentioned before, our right of top priority is as inherent rights holders is very important for us, and this is a treaty right, and the Crown expresses that, and that we should continue to exercise our right of top priority. You should have top priority when it comes to hunting, trapping, and fishing, especially when it comes to moose hunting. You should be the first one to have access. And those licenses that have been issued to non-Indigenous people is a violation of your right. You've been advocating to not issue licenses to non-Indigenous people because our people have the right of access to top priority. And we've been advocating for that, and we will continue to advocate. And I'm thankful that we have an Indigenous Premier today. I think we have hope to make changes. And I think we have hope to collaborate and to sit down together and forge a new path for our Indigenous hunters and trappers and fishermen. And it's happening now. You are being heard, you will be heard, and there will be changes. And it's happening now. Hi.
Thank you, Grand Chief Seti. Well spoken. Now I'd like to call up Grand Chief Jerry Daniels of the Southern Chiefs Organization. And just, it's really interesting to hear, when they talk about the history of, me too, I was brought up on the land with my grandfather. I took over his trap line, and this year marks the 48th year that we've been working that line. So we spent our entire life on that line, learning from our elders and from the land, that we love so much. And it's good that other people recognize that, and the elders that come before us that paved our way. With that, Grand Chief Daniels, we're good.
Thank you. Bonjour, I want to thank Wayne Manningway and the other elders this morning, obviously my uncle Dave Daniels, and also everyone who was involved in the pipe ceremony this morning. Thank you so much for starting us off. I want to acknowledge Treaty 1 territory, Chief Daniels, who's in the back, Chief Catchaway, Chief DeJarlis, other chiefs. I think those are the ones from South McLean is here as well. I want to recognize him and Grand Chief SETI, thank you for being here, and Minister Bushy and Moses who joined us. I know Moses had to leave, but we have Ian here, and so thank you for sticking around, Ian. I know you take what we say here very, very seriously. I want to just also acknowledge the Ribbon Skirt Day as well, and Isabella Kulak, who was told not to wear her ribbon skirt when she went to school quite a few years ago, and acknowledge Senator McCollum, who actually created the legislation to recognize today as Ribbon Skirt Day, and so I want to thank them as well for what they've done. And all those women who were at Polo Park today, you know, the singers and the drummers who went over there and sang and took a stance to just re-emphasize how important it is for our people to be able to express who they are. And that's what that ribbon skirt is all about, so thank you again. I just can't thank enough the organizers for doing this. Thank you, Mike, and the committee here. Thank you so much, Ron, and others who've put this on. It goes way back. You know, like we could talk about infringement of treaty. You know, and it's been an ongoing conflict that we're all dealing with out on the land and in the bush and in the communities. It's something that's never going to stop. We all have to come to grips with the fact that we're going to have to always defend our treaty rights. We're always going to have to defend that. Doesn't matter who's in government. Doesn't matter who's in the provincial government. Doesn't matter who's federal. We're always going to have to defend, because for many years we have to learn from what's happening and what's occurring. Since the beginning of when our colonial relatives came here, it was always about dispossessing us from our lands. That hasn't changed. That's been transferred, and they don't make those statements publicly. They've learned not to do that. Those statements are made at kitchen tables. They're made in private rooms. And they organize and think strategically about how they're going to take away our rights. And so I want to thank the First Peoples Law for coming here and giving an explanation about sort of the legal ways that government is infringing. And so they're kind of doing what we're doing. They're circling the wagons, because that's what we used to do. You know, we used to circle, look for weaknesses, but that was a different time. But I want to point to that because that's what they're doing. They're circling our treaty rights. They're looking for weaknesses. And if you pay attention to some of the things that she was talking about, what we're seeing happening federally, is that they're looking for ways to infringe on treaty rights. So we stand here, obviously, and I've been listening since a very young man, since I was very young, about treaty is law. You know, and these are our rights. And absolutely they are. But what I've witnessed is the continued infringement. And they're looking for legal avenues to infringe. And they make statements within legal decisions that, you know, in this case, in a case where, let's say moose, for example, are threatened, or they're about to go extinct, regardless of how they've managed it, because it hasn't been us who've managed it, regardless of how they've managed it, they have to put a stop now to moose hunting, because there may not be any more moose left. Obviously, that's what we agree with. What we don't agree with is how it's been managed. And we haven't been a part of that. Conservation has been a part of that, and the Wildlife Federation has been the advocacy body for the colonial people who are here, the non-First Nations people who are here. And they've been the ones who've, I think, benefited from policy over the last many decades. And so that's, in a way, who is really pushing to try to infringe on our rights when it comes to this file particularly. So, you know, I can go over a lot of the problems. You know, obviously we disagree. NRTEA is not something that we think it needs to be revisited. It is obviously an infringement on our rights. And, anytime you're restricting our people from managing, whether it's policy or just legislation, we're dealing with those things, but we're also dealing with the culture of wanting to harass First Nations. Because I can guarantee you, they're going to spend more time on us than they're going to spend on the average, and we all know that from experience. So that's part of the culture. That's not policy. That's just the culture of the Conservation Office. It's the way they operate. So that's not going to change through policy or through legislation. That's going to change over the course of many, many, many years. And so the first thing that I said when I came up here, one of the things I wanted to say was that we're always going to have to defend. We're always going to have to defend. It's never going to stop. So we have to come to grips with that. As leaders, as hunters, as fishermen, we have to come to grips with the fact that we're always going to have to defend. So what does that mean? That means the solutions that we come out with here, when we talk about unity or that we're going to do something, we have to talk about how are we going to do that? How are we going to fund it? Who's going to do that? Who's going to deal with the legal when someone gets charged with you get your vehicles taken, you get your guns taken, you get charged? Who's going to defend you in court? Is the government of the province going to fund it? Is it the feds going to fund it? Are we going to pool money as communities? Are we going to pool money as individuals? Create an association of Indigenous hunters and fishers, and we pool money. And we have sort of our best legal minds to do that. Are we going to do it that way? Or are we going to wait for government to pass legislation? So there's a lot of scenarios that we can put in place and we can follow through on. And Mike, I'm sure, and the team has thought about some of these things over time. But when I think about the challenges we have here, that's what I think about. I think we have to deal with, first of all, the charges and that sort of stuff. Also the taking of our vehicles, taking of our guns, but also the managing of the licenses. And we've put forward that as a solution. Many groups have. I think AMC had. We advocated. I'm sure Treaty 2 has, about having, either a cooperative approach or a shared approach or some duality around licensing, where we had at least a role and we at least knew how many licensings were going out and whether or not somebody should even have that license. Because maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they're not. There's someone we're aware of in our communities that shouldn't be hunting. And also the selling selling and giving tours to people from out of the country as well. So those sorts of things. So those are I think just some of the things that I see. The same thing goes for fishing. Obviously, and it's just like a corporate takeover. You know what you do? You flood the market so that people can't compete. Small businesses can't compete. You flood it. You flood the market. You lower prices. And then they don't have no money, so they have to sell their assets. That's what's happened. That's what's happened to our fishermen. They've reached a tough time, and then when a tough time comes, they come and buy our licenses. And guess what? They never give them back. They may tell you they'll give you back, but they'll never give you back. And so then it relies on the province or whoever else is involved to either rectify it in some way, either give more licenses, but then, they're going to have to deal with, I'm sure, whoever's in the conservation office telling them you can't do that because there's not enough fish or there's not enough, Those are the reasonings, those are the conversations, I'm sure, that go on. And so we have to understand that. But those are the areas we have to think about. We have to gather resources to defend each other. We can't just defend one community or one person or if we're going to come together and talk about a unified strategy, we have to find a way to collectively pool our resources. And then we have to collectively decide on who's going to be the ones who legally look after all of this. Who's going to defend us? Or is there going to be a couple of different legal people who are going to defend us? So how does that look? Is that a person by person? Is it citizens that are going to do that? Is it communities that are going to do that? And so those are the only ways, I think, the path forward, because obviously as a Grand Chief for SCO, we can provide some funding. We get a little bit out of administration, and we do. Usually what we do is we see gaps in services and we try to fill certain things. This isn't just one, but we would be prepared to contribute something, you know, as I'm sure other organizations would be prepared to contribute something. So that's one thing we can do. But then, you know, I think Ian obviously, and you know, we're in a really good time right now because we have a government that listens with the province, right? We have a First Nations premier. You know, Ian's you know, been in our communities. He's been a chief. He knows the issues. You know, maybe needs a little push, just like all of us sometimes, right? Moses too. He probably needs to push Moses, but they could create legislation that deals with the NRTA. They can create space there. They can create a licensing regime that's shared, or they could really transfer jurisdiction to First Nations. They can create some sort of a framework. They can do that. They can do it right now. And it would probably be good to do it right now because when are we going to have another opportunity? If we don't do it now, when's it going to happen? If it can't be done right now as with the First Nations premier, when is it ever going to happen? So, and you know, not all of us like, you know, the feds, but they've been pretty good to us, to be honest, you know. There's lots of things they do that we probably don't agree with, you know, but you know, in the federal, it's kind of like it's like this, right? It's like some things like, oh, that's not what I would do. But we have George's principle. We have like a lot of, you know, we got housing funding. There's a lot more than any other time. And we're continuing to put pressure. We do. We send letters. We have the meetings. We get the calls. We work with our other leaders, and we put pressure. It's not like First Nations aren't doing it. We've been doing it. And we continue to do it. And we're going to continue to do that. But a lot of this hunting and fishing guts, a lot of it is really provincial because of the NRTA, right? So they play a very big role in that. So we can set that up, but I would just say though, on that issue particularly, if we're going to do that, we have to find a way to entrench it, you know. And I know we'll have to always defend it because there'll be, God forbid, one day Ian's not here, you know, or NDP's not here, or there's a government in there who doesn't like our people, you know, or doesn't believe in it. We're going to have to deal with that time too. So we have to prepare for that. The same way colonial governments are always preparing for anticipated threats. We have to anticipate, and then we have to do it, you know, as a collective. So I would just say that in terms of the structure of conservation in this province, the licensing. I would include all of that in there. How are we gonna rectify the loss of licenses that are existing right now? How are we gonna deal with the fact that fishermen, I'm sure many of you are struggling with this, some of you, I know one of our chiefs has, is the marketing of our fish. Because you gotta have access to transportation, and you gotta have someone who's gonna buy. And ever since the Freshwater Marketing Board has been dissolved, it hasn't been our people who've benefited. Some have, maybe. But generally, across the board, I would think that the commercial, more industry, heavy capital-based fishing outfits have probably benefited a lot more. Because they'll take up more of they probably wouldn't grab up a lot of the market. And so those are, I think, in my eyes, the challenges that we face. And you know, a lot of this relies on our partner in the province, and I hope we can have some constructive conversations around that. It's going to take also the people in here to guide that, because we need to know your real what's really going on. Because I don't know. I hear, but I don't know exactly what it is or who, how, you know. So we need our best people, and I know they're all here, you know. And so we just need to come together and have those conversations and make sure that Ian knows and his team knows, and hopefully create a solution that our ancestors that are going to come 100 years from now, and the ones behind us, can really celebrate. Because I think that's what we all want to do. We want to honor our people in the past and protect those in the future. And the other one is how we should think about too, and I know it's probably going a bit further, is you know, recognizing the land and the water and the fish as having their own rights. You know, like they have a right to live too. The land has a right to live too. And there's districts in this world where you recognize the land as human being and you give them rights like that. So that's something we have to think about as well. So I'll leave that with you, and thank you again for giving me the honor to speak with you today. Wish.
Thank you, Grand Chief. I'm just going to call, Ron's going to take over for me. My back's getting sore. I was pretty sick this fall there, so my leg was infected, and I just don't want to overdo it. Ovid has a couple of things that he'd like to say, but I wanted to just to mention one thing, NRTA. So Wayne and I bought back the bundle, NRTA bundle from Masquachis this last summer, and we'll be hosting NRTA Summit in June 9th to the 14th at Lower Fort Garry, where Treaty 1 was initially signed. So that information will go out. Ron's a part of our team there, and a few other people as well. So we're just getting ready to move forward to that. I asked Henry to be one of our elders on the committee there. So you'll start seeing the posters and stuff coming out shortly. And you know, I'm trying to look at the opportunity for schools too. You know, what does NRTA mean? We should be going to our community schools and educating our staff, our grade 10, 11, and 12 students about NRTA and how it has hurt us. You know, I know Ron said he's willing to go out and do some traveling. Just kidding. But there are people out there that could advocate for us, you know, in each of the regions. Jerry talked about, you know, some of the stuff that has sparked, you know, some understandings and reminiscing. Conservation officers, they shoot from the hip. They charge you. And they don't care whether or not you're right or wrong. Just recently we had a couple of boys lose their truck. Guess where they were hunting? On TLE land that we purchased in Peguis, right next to the reserve. So now we got to fight them. Nisha's got to fight to get that truck and their deer back, because even though it's not transferred into actual reserve land yet, we still made the purchase. The fee simple land still belongs to Peguis. And our people were charged for hunting on their own land, you know. And RCMP take guns too. And many times people have called me, hunters are going or coming back and they get stopped and they don't have an FAC, so the guns are taken away and they're charged. Or else they're kept until somebody goes there and takes an FAC. They don't recognize our status cards. And our leadership has to change that. Our political leaders, to make sure that the RCMP don't continue to do that, because again, you're infringing upon our rights. Incident reports we have upstairs, we got from Treaty 2. If people want to fill out an incident report, we'll keep it confidential. But the more information we gather and as we move forward, the better that this government could understand the impacts of those incidents to our people. All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Ron, and before Ron does the Q&A and then where we're going from here, Ovid has a couple of comments he wants to make.
Chinopu, I won't be long, but I probably have the strongest indigenous name in this room, Pastavias. Dried meat. Yeah, I wanted to share some thoughts I have about how we can move forward to have the treaties honored here in this country, but also here in this province. As you know, at one time, many years ago, I don't know, 34 years ago, I was the national chief of the Assembly First Nations. And at that time, we were working with the federal government and the provinces on something called constitutional reform. and we were trying to use their supreme law to our advantage. And the way to do that was to have our rights specifically identified in their constitution, so that our treaty rights would be protected, and our right to our own governments would be protected, so that in the future their governments could not interfere with our freedom as a people. Okay, and that process started well before the time I became national chief, and many of our leaders represented us in a very strong way to try to persuade these white politicians that we have pre-existing rights to their arrival to this country. And it was not easy to persuade many of these politicians because they had no historical background about our people. But they also had an attitude that we were inferior people, that we have been defeated, and that we should now fit into their country. And that's a very strong prejudice, because that tells me that they believe that they were superior to all the leaders that went there on our behalf. And I listened at that time for about 10 years in the background to our leaders going to all these meetings, trying to persuade these white politicians to do the honorable thing, to respect the treaties that our ancestors had made many, many decades before Canada was formed. I mean, after Canada was formed. And some before that called pre-Confederation treaties. Maaga, Sasip, Tamag, but they're very hard-headed people. Muna, itatagyo na anak, they don't listen to us. I won't say paint because what they think is, that they already control everything. A skill, we know how to paint them, but the land belongs to them. Even to govern over people, they say that their form of government, which they call a democracy, is a superior way of governing people, and that when they look at us and we say to them, we want our own self-government, what do they say to us? Well, you have to fit into the framework of the country. And what does that mean, if we have to fit into their framework? It means the provinces would have jurisdiction over land, over children, over families, over resources. All these things would be their natural power. And all we would get out of that relationship is what they called delegated authority. In other words, we would just become like municipalities under their system of government. And that is not what the constitutional reform was about. And that's why our leaders went and fought for us for so long with no success. And I was one of them afterwards. But in the background for 10 years, I was the advisor, the constitutional legal advisor to many of the chiefs that spoke on our behalf. And I learned from that. And I eventually became the national chief because of that. Because I was educated and trained by our own leaders about how to look at our people, how to represent them, and how to see the nature and scope of our rights. Not the way in which the white people see the nature and scope of our rights as being inferior to them. When it can't look like that. We have to think differently. So for example, when it comes to these laws that are hurting our people right now, the Crown Lands legislation that was made by the previous government, and the night hunting legislation that was also made by the previous government, These are hurtful. They're measures to put us down. They're deliberate efforts by white leaders to suppress our rights as a people. That's why they're bad law. They're not good law. And no one in this world, I don't care who they are, whether you're Chinese or Asian or Indian, whatever, you're not obligated to follow any bad law. Your duty is to your own self-respect as a person. And if a law is wrong, you do not follow it. And these laws are wrong. And when the NDP were in opposition, that is what they said, that these laws are wrong. And now they're in a position of power. Now they're in a position where they could repeal these laws. That is my recommendation. That is where we start. We ask the Premier of the province and his ministers to sit down in their cabinet table within the next few months and figure out how are they going to repeal these legislation. Because if they repeal that law, there is no need for court action. And that will save Pegwish a lot of money. But that's not the only reason I'm advocating. I'm advocating because it's a bad law. And when the NDP were in opposition, they saw that as a bad law. And now they're in government, it didn't make it a better law. It's still a bad law. So they should repeal it. That should be our position. How many of you agree with me? Stand up. Okay, you can sit down now, behave yourself. That I wanted to say is this. Egata pagitsiak, not to give up. Maga kwes mamaita tatut kat makuma. But for all of us to work together on this thing. Now, Mr. Pais, to go in Nunina, I'm a Cree from Grand Rapids, right? And I have a hell of a good golf game, better than my buddy over here. Ron Maziabit, who's the additional happy guy. We have a good time together. Now, but we are one people. Ultimately, we're all one people. And they have seen us in that way too. The settler has seen us only as one people. But the problem is they also took it one step further and they've said to themselves, these are inferior people. That's where it stops. For us, we're not inferior to anybody. We're equal to each other. And I also have this dream that when the people rise up, what we're seeing right now, when the people rise up, that is when the treaties will be honored, when the people rise up. So the Grand Chief Merritt has hired me to work with her to be her advisor on how to have the treaties respected by the Crown. So one of the ideas that we're working on right now is to have probably the biggest gathering of our people ever in the history of this country, sometimes in the summer, with only one topic, our treaties and how to get them honored by the country. That's the only topic. So we're working right now with the Treaty Commissioner and our office, but also with the Elders Council of the AMC. And my job is to go to all the various treaty groups, eventually, to engage them in the same process. And I just heard from what Mike said that you're having a meeting anyway about NRTA in June, right? Yep. So that would fit just perfect. provided you organize it. So we'd have to sit down, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And figure out how we can collaborate and how we can.
Well, you just became part of the committee.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna commit. This could become probably the strongest gathering of all our people at one location and any time. The only other time I saw that was when Elijah Harper defeated the Meeslake with an eagle feather. Our people from across the country came by the thousands to witness that event. About the power that we have as a people when we gather up like that. And we stand tall as one. And we don't become divided. The only other time I saw that was when we were dealing with the conflict called Oka. And leaders from across the country came to Ganawagi. All the chiefs across the country and their elders showed up in that community where Phil Fontaine said to the assembly, "We are here to give you unconditional support as a people." This is what is possible when we unite on a cause. And the cause for us is freedom, our freedom as a people. That's the cause. And the treaty is about our freedom as a people. That's the cause. And if we stick with that idea, then we can deal with the Crown, the provincial government, for example, with what was offered you today. We can co-develop the moose management policy. Co-development doesn't mean that the government of Manitoba develops it. It means we develop it together with them. Because I know, from my own understanding about our history as a people, that we're proud about our conservation practices, our historical conservation practices. And that tradition kept our nations alive for centuries. Because if we had not done that, we would have starved as a result of overexploitation of the resources that we depend on for our livelihood. So let's do that co-development on moose policy, because that would mean that it would have to be asymmetrical, meaning that it doesn't have to be the same policy for Grand Rapids or Moose Lake or Swan Lake. It could be asymmetrical, because not all communities are identical. And the other recommendation I have is this, when it comes to the duty to consult. That is another area where we can co-develop the provincial standard for the duty to consult and accommodate our rights as people. But we should start with our own. Recently, I worked with one community in Northern Ontario to develop their own law, their own community law on the duty to consult. That is what we need. We need our own laws in every community about the duty to consult. But we wouldn't want to stop there. We would want to make sure that whatever laws we make would be complied with by the province in terms of the duty to consult and accommodate. So the co-development would still be necessary with them. And the biggest problem that we've had with respect to the creation of reservations as a treaty right is how slow the governments were to make that happen. Because they had no real intention to make that happen. So their slowness had a purpose. Their purpose was to make sure that they occupied all our lands before reserves were given to us by virtue of the treaty. And even the reference to hunting rights that's in the Natural Resources Transfer Agreement Act that says access to hunt and all that. That's not part of the treaty. Our right is stronger than what the NRTA says our hunting right is. And that's what we have to keep in mind, is that they have used their constitution and their lawmaking power to suppress our treaty rights. And they are still doing it across the country. So how do we prevent that from happening? And how do we reclaim all the mistakes that have been made by them? Well, we have to amend the NRTA. That's what we need. A table. We need a table where our political leaders will be present with the provincial cabinet. A table between First Nations and the province only. Just the First Nations only and the province. About how we're going to amend the NRTA to make it conform and comply with the treaties. So these are just ideas. And these ideas come about because at one time I was, for about 8 years, on a voluntary basis, the national spokesperson for Treaties 1 to 11. We had no money. So all we did was just gather up and meet and talk about how we're going to make sure the treaties are honored by this country. But we never really got to the point of creating a political strategy, a legal strategy, or any kind of strategy. Because when we gathered up like this, most people would come there with their grievances about what's happened to them, right? And they have to be heard. Those grievances are real. They're not imaginary. They cannot be dismissed. They have to be attended to. So, thankfully, we have in this province a great history of resistance. Resistance to injustice. And I will remind you what happened to our friend J.J. Harper. I was working with him. I was a legal advisor to something called the Constitutional Committee of Chiefs. And we had a meeting on Ellis Avenue. The building was owned by the Southeast Resource Development Council. And he was one of the co-chairs of that committee. We were developing a strategy about how we're going to try to persuade the Crown to honor our treaties by amending their supreme law. That's the night he got killed by the Winnipeg police. And what came about with that is a public inquiry. And one of the recommendations of that public inquiry was for the province to get out of the field of the administration of justice in our communities. And that we as a people would set up our own institutions of justice, our own tribal courts, if we wanted to go that direction. But none of these recommendations were ever implemented. And OPA led to the Royal Commission of Aboriginal People. That was a commission that was authorized by the Conservative government. And when the Liberals came into power, when Chrétien became the Prime Minister, they ignored the Royal Commission of Aboriginal People. So all those recommendations were never attended to either. And now we have more recent ones. Truth and Reconciliation Commission, one specifically for our woman, our murdered and missing woman. And what's going to happen with those recommendations? Are they going to fall the same way the AGI report fell? The same way that the Royal Commission of Aboriginal People fell? Yes, it will if we don't act. If we don't assert as a people to have those governments honor their own words that are contained in those reports. So that is an obligation we have to become more political. We have to become more political, people. Isam kiam gitonam stato, eh? We always say kiam, which means it doesn't matter. Believe me, it matters. Maybe when we say kiam, we don't have to deal with the psychological dissonance we feel in our spirit and our hearts about inaction. But we can't say kiam forever. Tamamawit tamaku. So all to go, we have to work together. Negomina, we have to become very political. Enough. I don't want to say unkindness. I don't want to abandon kindness. Kindness should still be our public policy. But we don't have to be subservient to the governments. Kamaskaisi, on this, because we'll gain strength. When we work together on something, we will see this. When we gather up this summer, you come. You bring everybody that's within your own authority as a person, like your family. And let's show the province what we're capable of as a people. When we rise up as a people, and we gather up by the thousands in the summer, that is one thing that we can do, because all we need for that is our feet and our mind, that it'll take us there. Ask it now. Thank you.
All right, my buddy Ron Missy Abbott is going to take over from here. And this is the meat and potatoes of our meeting. You know, we heard from our dignitaries, our leadership, our provincial government, and so on. And I ask that people respect and not leave until we're done at the end of the day after the traveling song. Ron's going to take over the Q&A, and then where do we go from there? And it's very, very important, this process. Not everybody's going to have a chance to ask questions, but we do have incident report forms, or if you want to make any comments, it's being recorded and notes are being taken so that we can keep moving this forward. Very good. Thank you very much.
You know, one thing that's missing from this room is some levity. Anishinaabe people gather and they laugh a lot, and I'm thank Grand Chief Steady for telling us he's a vegetarian. One of the other, I also have to say that this was, I've been involved in organizing a lot of meetings, participating in a lot of meetings, and Mike was laying in a hospital hallway. Right? Where'd Mike go? Right? Mike? When we were finalizing this meeting in December, he was texting from a hospital hallway in Selker. And I thought to myself, oh boy, here we go. Who's going to show up? I mean, who's going to be there? It's going to be one of the worst organized meetings I've ever been a part of, but yet had the greatest attendance and participation. So I'd like to say Chiniwech for everyone for showing up, and I think it just means and shows how important our rights are as Anishinaabe people in this province and in this country. I'd also like to thank Minister Bushy for sticking around. Although one of the ministers most responsible for all of the things that were faced, Minister Moses, departed within, I think, half hour of arriving here. There's a legal term, I think, that's called real and constructive knowledge. And I look at Minister Bushy. I don't know if you have any staff here. Is there? No staff? Where are they? There's real constructive knowledge, so they can't deny, the province can't deny that what we're telling them or what they've heard here has not been heard. I have a little story I'm going to talk about with Minister Bushy when he was a chief. As has been said, I was the director of the Aboriginal Relations Branch for Manitoba Conservation for 19 years. And Minister Bushy, he was a chief in Hollow Water, and he saw all these cottagers bypass his community, going into their multi-million-dollar cottages, and then his people being kicked out when they were driving around the roads. And he was very frustrated by that. And what did Chief Bushy at the time do? He put up a blockade. He put up a blockade. And prior to that, he was told by government, well, we don't have the money, the time, or the resources to sit down with you to talk about cottage lot development. And so up the blockade went. All of a sudden, we were called into these meetings. I was part of the working group. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? That's exactly what happened at the Ledge in all of our buildings. And this was back and forth in the media. And then one day, Chief Bushy, Minister Bushy, was kind of disappointed that no one from the province was coming to his blockade. So Minister called us in and then said, what are we going to send out there? Well, you should go. You're the minister. Well, what did he do? He sent me. Me and I think it was Mitch Walker, Chief Conservation Officer out of Lac du Bonnet. So we arrived at his blockade, and the first thing he said to us was, what are you doing here? and we told Chief Bushy, well, you said nobody from the province was coming, so we're here. I think he was extremely disappointed that it was us that showed up, and he slumped back in his chair. I swear he wanted to kick us off the blockade, but he respected us and allowed us to stay. So I thank him for that. A little bit about me. As I said, I was the director of the Aboriginal branch for Manitoba Conservation for 19 years, and it was largely under an NDP party. The branch was created by the late Minister Laughlin, and I think it was 1999-2000, and I was the first director and only director of the branch because when the PCs came in, they killed it, no longer in play. And I was also a part of the committee that worked on the night hunting legislation. And we heard Ovid talk about bad law should be repealed. And one of the things we did, I was a fourth level bureaucrat, so there was a minister, deputy minister, assistant deputy minister, and then directors. I was at the director level. One of the things I was able to advocate for was for 2 elders gatherings. And I thought, well, if they could hear from our elders, they would listen to the highest form of authority that we have in our culture, in our society as a group of elders. So our first meeting took place at Turtle Lodge in Saugeen, led by the late Dave Crushane Jr. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Minister of Opposition, now Premier Canoe, was in attendance at that meeting. So we held one there, we held one out in Brandon. And out of that came a report. And out of that came, we didn't have a representation from all of our nations, all of the nations, our First Nations in Manitoba. But what came out of that was a report that was approved and received by Pallister at the time. And the elders gave direction to the province. And the province accepted that direction, And these are the things we took around to the nations that consulted, and these were the things that the government was supposed to implement. Aboriginal and treaty rights and night hunting and safety, drafting of customary law of the hunt, development of an education and training module based on Anishinaabe law on safe and responsible hunting. Those were supposed to be done immediately by the province. Long term, build a better relationship and understanding between conservation officers and Indigenous people. One of the biggest complaints we heard was access to land or loss of access to land. And out of there, government committed to develop a permission request for hunting access on private lands. So it means government was going to work with private landowners to gain access to their lands for people to go exercise their rights on. Training and employment opportunities for First Nations in Indigenous Conservation Officer Program. I think there were 6 or 8 positions put aside, so we have more of our people working there, because one of the things we heard is we don't have enough of our people there. So that was a commitment made. There was supposed to be development of a hunter safety program for Anishinaabe people, Indigenous people, and then participation in the environment and wildlife management of resources in our province. Not one of those things occurred. And the elders wanted those as accommodation measures before the night hunting legislation was introduced and passed. So the legislation was passed, and not one of these things was accomplished or implemented. And the other thing that the PCs did, Minister Bushy, for your, I'm sure you know this, it used to be consultation and accommodation, almost like brother and sister, husband and wife. You can't have one without the other. And what the PC government did is they removed accommodation from consultation, which is wrong and illegal in my opinion. But that's what they did. They removed accommodation. So as a result of that, they moved ahead and implemented the night hunting legislation, even though they were told and approved by the premier the day that we're going to, yes, we'll commit to do those. And they didn't do them, and they moved ahead with the legislation. So that legislation is illegal. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a bureaucrat, but that legislation is illegal. We didn't follow through. If it's not illegal, it's immoral because of a commitment made by the government in the day. So just something I wanted to pass on to the working group here. And now Mike is challenged, Pegwas has challenged the legislation. Pegwas is challenging on the assumption that they weren't consulted, and he's right. We never consulted Pegwas. We never sat down with Pegwas. So now I'm, as I said, in the province, I was the 4th level bureaucrat, and I left the province as a result of the PCs coming in. I didn't leave on my own terms, kind of forced out, and I was offered a job at Treaty 2, and I was the care and protection of the natural world lead keeper at the time. And what we did there is we started developing laws with respect to resources. We have a law that we recognize water as a living entity, passed by our leaders and our people. So we have that law that's in existence. We also have consultation and accommodation laws. We're working right now on citizenship. We're working on citizenship law. We feel that the government does not have the right to tell us who our people are. And we're working on that. We're going to be engaging on that. We're also developing constitutions for our people, for our communities. And we launched a class action lawsuit just before Christmas on the treaty annuity. So Lake Manitoba is the First Nation representative. I'm the individual named in the class action on treaty annuity. The position being that that $5 has not increased since 1871. And we feel that's wrong. It's been proven in courts by other nations, other jurisdictions. So we've launched that, and I'm sure there's going to be others being launched. And this is all done with support of our chiefs in our territory. So I say thanks to the leadership for that. Now, we've been asked to come to the table to talk about moose management. If you take a look at the map on moose management, moose closures, 90+% of those moose closures are in Treaty 2 territory. And yet we have not been able to bring Manitoba Wildlife and Manitoba Wildlife Ranch to the table on our terms. They want us to participate in management, but when I was a bureaucrat within the province, I asked them to define management. What's management? And I asked them as little as 2 weeks ago. You still have not defined what is management. We don't want to be advisors. We don't want to be advisors giving advice and then our words not being listened to. So one of the things that we've done is we developed a law. We call it a law, Onakwanigewin, as our people call it. It's called AAAO, Anishinaabe Agawidwinan Ake Onakwanigewin. It means law of the land. So we've developed that, and what we need now is input from our communities and our people. So we're going to be commencing our robust engagement of our nations. We're meeting tomorrow actually to start discussing how we're going to do that. So I'm boasting a little bit about Treaty 2, but Treaty 2's done a lot of work in this field. And one of the questions that is asked is, why do provincial and federal laws apply to us? Because we haven't documented our own. So that's what we're starting. We've documented and developing our laws. And going to challenge government. What are you going to do now? Because it's a firm belief in our people that we never surrendered the right to represent ourselves. Our right to represent ourselves is as good as the day of signing treaty in this country. Where did that right go? You ask federal, provincial government, where did that right go for our people to speak for ourselves? Did you buy it? Did you steal it? Did we lose it? It's still there. Treaties are still there, and it's still alive. So that's the premise that we're operating under at Treaty 2. We believe that right still exists to be inherent and sovereign, and we're acting accordingly. So it's very important. I think, and then when we ask federal lawyers, at the tables we're involved in, are you going to recognize this right when we present it to you? And I was shocked. One of the federal lawyers said, yeah, we have to. What? I was expecting an argument, but no, they said we have to. I was shocked at that. So anyways, that's a little bit about, me and a bit of the work I'm doing at Treaty 2. And I know we're broadcasting, and I hate to say this, but is Philip Charles here?
Oh, he's back there.
Where is he?
Hiding.
Philip, where are you?
He's back over on that side.
Oh, yay. Me and Philip.
Biggest poacher.
We are, big poacher. But me and Philip Charles were, I think we should have been awarded or commended some kind of a medal because we taught the Interlake conservation officers the art of high pursuit. And am I proud of that? Yeah. You know what? As far as I'm concerned, we were exercising our rights. And our elders always tell us that the ones that protect the right are the ones that exercise them. So those of you sitting in this room, if you're exercising your right to the land, you're protecting those rights. Because if you weren't exercising them, there'd be no need for them. So those of you that are exercising your rights, continue. And I think we have a solid commitment from our Grand Chiefs and hopefully from the provincial government that we're going to have a table, we're going to have an audience, and we have to work collaboratively. And I support Minister Bushy's words on that. I'm glad I recorded them because I hope I don't have to use them in the future. So with that said, I know everybody here got up, a majority got up when it was asked who was harassed or been interfered with when you were exercising your rights as Anishinaabe people, as Indigenous people, and I think a large majority of the room got up. So as a result of that, I'm going to ask, don't put all your hands up all at once. Oh, the other thing is this is one of the first of many gatherings we're going to have on this because this is so important. We talk about hunting, fishing, trapping rights, but the right that comes from that is the right to be on the land. Everything else comes from that. The right to be on the land. If we don't have access to land, our rights are useless. Treaty 2 is 22.5 million acres. 85% of it is in private ownership. We only have access to 15%. And I bet you that 15%, 7% is cleared. Can't see a darn thing. So our people have to leave our treaty territory to exercise their rights. The moose closures in Treaty 2, largely in Treaty 2, if our people want a moose, they have to leave our territory. They have to go to Saskatchewan. That's not right. That's not right. And the thing I tell the province is, you've had 100+ years of managing the resources. Take a look at what you've done. I know we can't do a worse job than that. We can do a better job of that. We just have to be given the opportunity, and I think that's most important, right? Us being given the opportunity. And my biggest fear is, ministers like I know Ian is an Anishinaabe person with rights. He knows where we're coming from, but my biggest fear is with Minister Moses is he's going to be influenced by the bureaucracy. And I have little faith in that bureaucracy because I worked in it. Very little faith in it. And I don't know who's there to educate them on rights, on treaties, on our aspirations. I don't think there's anyone there. So we have to count on his fellow ministers to do that for him. I'm not going to write him off. I'm not going to write this government off. I think we can, as Grand Chief Daniel says, if we can't do things politically where we're at this time and place, we're never going to be able to do it. So this, we have a four-year window, and if they do well, they may get another term. But the opportunity is here, and I hope we take advantage of that. And I'm certainly going to count on leadership, our leaders, to help us. We need you there. Our Treaty 2 chiefs, very important. and I think you understand this and know this, you have to look at our leadership. A minister has access to a bureaucracy to help him and her. What do our chiefs have? Our chiefs do not have the same level of bureaucracy. So when our chiefs get sent letters, are inundated with letters, emails, phone calls, texts, they don't have the luxury of staff to go through the correspondence that they receive. So things get left on the side. And I was a fourth level bureaucrat in government, and I'm a second level bureaucrat with our chiefs because they have no one in between, right? So those things have to change. So thank you very much for that. That's a little bit about the stuff that we're working on in Treaty 2. We're moving ahead, asserting our right as sovereign people in a respectful way, not demanding, saying this is who we are, this is who our people were, and these are the things we want to do, and these are the things we're going to do. So with that, I am going to ask for questions. Who's got a question? Comments. I think you're not. Does this work, Mike?
Yeah, there's the only one we got.
Okay, so I'm going to, do you want to come up or just?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. I'll go around.
We gave you that. You got to run around.
Hello, my name is James Witt, and we I've been participating in this 20 years, ever since my uncle got shot. J.J. Harper. Then I made a plan to try and influence, get to the government of what we are and who we are and what needs to be done. And nobody got it. I've been fighting for that, and I need that. As people here, I cried when my uncle got shot, and I've been fighting ever since. I've never had a job, right up to now, ever since, but I've been there. I've scoured, I've tried to put people there, my people, to make that happen, to make that change. Island Lake, I'm from Island Lake, across this country, your kids are not taught, this is all yours, Chinegua. Your kids own this land, and we better teach them fast, because these things are legislative, and those laws, we can change them. And I've been fighting ever since, whether it be left or right, as long as we got somebody in there, look what happens. And at the same time, Island Lake has about 20,000 people. We don't even have a hospital. And that's something serious, because we don't have, look at the towns, they're only like 300, they have an hospital. When are my kids and my grandkids do something about it? Thank you very much.
I'm going to go over there. Something.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful to all the leaders that we have in the room and all the expert knowledge that you brought with us. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. I do appreciate that we're all on Treaty 1 territory right now. I'm a Peguis member. My name is Vern Coot-Bird. But along with the legislation repealing that we're talking about, I have a question for any ministers that are still in the room. And I'm very grateful to the one minister that did give us 9 minutes of his time. Very grateful. That's been the story of our lifetime. Now, from what I gather, when someone is exercising their rights, it's been Canada's plan all along to charge us and make us criminals. How about we repeal those criminalizations of us defending our rights here in the country? We're well aware that we carry huge percentage of the votes for all politicians, including the Prime Minister that promised all First Nations clean water. And I think there are people here who can speak to the results of that. So my question to the minister is, how about that? And is that criminalization federal or provincial? And as some of you may know, our wonderful country of Canada makes you wait 7 years before you can get a federal pardon. And during that time, you're inhibited as to where you can travel and what you can do, the positions you get in this country. So that's one of the offshoots of us defending our rights. Okay? So the second question I have would be for the chiefs. And I would welcome any chief, or all of them, to talk about this. We did hear from it a little bit, and the only comment this morning on our self-government came from Mr. McCready here. That was over 20 years ago, when Canada finally recognized, after 130 years, we have the right to govern ourselves. When are we going to start doing that? They talked about, the demonstrations that have gone on and the changes that have made. Why are we not focused totally on self-government instead of letting the visitors come into our house and govern us? I don't know about any of you, but nobody comes into my house and governs us. Thank you.
I don't know, Minister Bushy, do you want to answer anything there? Or?
Thank you for the question. One thing that came to my mind when in the beginning when I first got here is when I stood up and seen who was affected, how were you affected? And it reminds me, because I do see some members from Hollowater, members from Saging as well. So how some of that has been affected is in terms of, here's a fine, for example, conservation, a fine $1,300, but if you plead guilty, it's going to go down to $400. So that sounds like a deal. That sounds like a good deal for some who also can't even afford the $400. So overall, that's not fair, because in that sense, you're guilty first and foremost before anything else, before you get a chance to say anything, do anything, or have a discussion with your community. So one thing that we would like to see be able to come, and this reminds me of the fishing conversation about a disciplinary board, if you will, or a committee made up of not only government and conservation, but of the Indigenous communities and First Nation communities as well, and representatives in that. So we have that discussion to have, this is why this happened. This is kind of, for lack of a better term, my side of the story, for example, rather than your side of the story is first and foremost before the judge or in court. So for me, that's something that I would like to see us to begin those discussions on, to have those discussions about a disciplinary advisory committee of some sort to be able to deal with these issues without the first step, in fact, being court. So how do we deal with this beforehand?
Grand Chief Daniels or Grand Chief Merrick, self-government? When are we going to implement? Is the question. FYI, we've started at Treaty 2. We're developing our laws, asserting the right to be self-governing.
Thank you for that question, and I'll give a chance to my colleague to respond, but I think fundamentally your inherent right for self-government is a right that exists pre-contact. For Europeans who are here, you had that right. And I think one of the things that we're guilty of is we're waiting for permission to exercise our self-government. We're waiting for governments to approve of it, sanction it, when already it has been in existence since time immemorial. I think the answer to that is stop waiting for anybody to let you or give you permission to exercise your self-government. I think you just have to establish your constitutions and your laws and start exercising your right to self-government. Simple as that.
I just want to acknowledge Ovid Murgaty's words about the Constitution and the recognition of rights, the affirmation of First Nations rights and the recognition that happened in 82, back when I was born. And how important that is, because you know, when the colonizers came, they brought their law, right? And their law is you know, the Constitution. It was created in British Parliament, and then they created that's how they created Canada, and then they created something called the Westminster Act that said we couldn't go back to British Parliament to challenge Canadian laws. So that was, and then they created the reason why they wanted to really create the Constitution Act in Canada was so that they could really sort of cement their independence. And so they really wanted us to be a part of that. So in order to appease our leaders at the time, and they probably gave other assurances. They said, well, we'll define what those rights are over the next 10 years. We'll have some First Ministers meetings. And they did, but we never got to an agreement. And that was probably the closest we ever got to self-governance in terms of the recognition by Canada. Now, many of us, especially sovereigntists who believe in our own sovereignty, will say that we don't need their recognition. The challenge is that they're going to continue to try to infringe. They're going to send their agents to try to enforce and charge us, right? Like that's the way it's structured right now. So when I think of governance and where we are right now, the governance rests with the First Nation. It starts with your community of Peguis. It starts with Saugeen. It starts with all of the First Nations. That's where the governance is. So then let's reference what Ron's saying here about how, we have a Treaty 1 who's working on a concept of a governance structure, constitution, maybe legislation, like different sort of how it's going to govern, right? And there's other groups who are doing this. We're working on it. Then you get to the point where you have to have ratification in our community. So that's, I think, probably the next step for some of these processes. And then, do we stop there? Is it a treaty? Do we stop with treaty? Or do we go bigger? Do we go Anishinaabe? Or, as what Ovid says, it's not just Anishinaabe, it's not just Dakota, it's all of us. It's the Cree, it's the Oji Cree, it's the Dene, it's the bigger, all of us as one people. Is that how we see ourselves as governance? So that's how we have to think. And so it's sort of a puzzle right now, I think, because there's communities that have laws, and there are chiefs and leaders who believe that the law of their territory stops at their community. It doesn't go to another community. And so that'll always be a challenge within ourselves, within our nations. We're going to be challenged with that, because not all communities are prepared to extend their jurisdiction or their recognition of other First Nations. It's just the way it is right now. And I'm not saying that's how it should be, it's just the way it is. And so we got to try to find a way to get to where we're attaching ourselves. So I agree, I think it's important that we're supporting one another, that we create a regional government, that we get bigger and bigger and try to have, at some point, maybe a national, if we could ever get there. It gets even more political, though, at that level. And it's even more challenging. We see it within the tribal count, like we see the challenges we have. But in terms of governance, we're going to have to be able to, so when you think of strategy, you got to think that way. As an individual, how can you defend? Or how can we all collectively defend as individuals? As a nation, a community, how can a community defend? What resources can be allocated, and who in the community can do this? Tribal council, treaty organization, SCO, MKO, AMC, all these different groups, the province, they play a role in it. And so I think what we want to get to is something that's enshrined, that can't change, because where Ovid was working on, the Constitution is the highest law of the land. If the Constitution says First Nations will have the right of jurisdiction to license, to manage the occupation of their lands, and identify all the Crown lands within the current Crown land, because they lease it right now. They lease, especially in the South, they lease all of our, and they're caught up in 15-year leases. And then every year or 2 years, some of those leases actually expire. And then actually SCO, we were able to, in the last auction, and we opposed it, but we entertained the process, and we were able to acquire over 10,000 acres. SCO did. What we're doing with it, we're not sure, but we want to probably do some berry picking, like my chief here, and maybe some hunting. But I think that's what we do. You know, in that process, we try to acquire those lands. So, but you know, those are the things that, in terms of the strategy that are in First Nations law governance, that those are the things we have to think about, and those are the challenges that we're going to have to address. Thank you. I hope
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a good question. I think that's I think it was Ovid Mercury actually stated with the Treaty 5 gathering back in Cumberland, I think. We got a little too complacent and a little lazy in making our own laws, because as long as there's a void that's there, provincial laws will always apply on our reserves and will apply on our citizens. Until we can fill that void with our own laws, then it creates the most provincial and the Canadian government away from our lands and our own, the way we do things. In Pimicikamak, you know, I had the pleasure, I have a former chief, he's a former chief from Pimicikamak. I also have a former chief over there, Tommy Amonias, and also former chief, Grand Chief Merrick was a chief from Pimicikamak. They all worked on these laws, so we have first law for Cross Lake, and we have 5 laws in Pimicikamak that we created our own. We didn't seek permission from Canadian government or provincial government, we just created them. They just started working with their own people, our own people. And we did that. And we're presently working on 2 more laws to start filling the void. So we can't just rely on the provincial government to regulate, monitor our people and how they hunt, trap, fish, and so forth. You know, we feel like we are the ones that to be able to do it better, because the power and authority rests at the community level, at the nation level. And that's where that answer needs to come from you people. You guys need to rise up and answer exactly what you're doing here. And make those laws and make, what do you want to see? What do you want it to say? Start that. Start with 1 sentence, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, get another person to do that. Pretty soon you will have your own law. And it doesn't have to fit that framework, the Canadian framework in the law, or the provincial framework of the law. Just make it look like the way you want it to look like. Your creation laws, your natural law, you know, all those things that come into play. And I think that's the way we need to start working on together. We have to start doing it. We can't rely on provincial government or the federal government to make these laws for us. They've done it for centuries already, the years, right? And look where it's gotten us. It didn't do us any good. So we have to right the wrong, we have to do it ourselves. And so thank you.
Thanks, sir. Chief Heidi Cook from Mississippi Cree Nation. I just want to thank everyone for everything that's being shared today, and Ovid, who is not an elder but is a mentor and a Muslim to my kids. I've been chief for about 3.5 years, and before that I was on council for 6 years, and before that I worked in the lands department when Ovid was our chief. He brought me home, and I'm grateful for that, because I got the education, like he was talking about, from our elders and our people in our community about our land and our rights. And one of the things that he shared with me over the years, you know, his generation, the generations before us, fought a lot of battles to get recognition for our rights. And while those are not over, they have made some progress in creating space for us. And he put it on me and you know, other people in my generation that we have to start filling that space. You know, if that space is going to expand, if we're going to achieve that real sovereignty and recognition of the treaties. So in my work in the community, starting in the lands department and then as counselor with the lands portfolio, and now as chief, I wanted to share one of the things that we worked on to address issues with moose hunting, with abuse of the fishery on Saskatchewan River. and also with logging. And that was to create our Kanawainistigewak, the Guardians program. These are, we have 3 members here. They're all guardians. They're commercial fishermen, they're hunters, and they're trappers. The people who know the land the best, the ones who are out there using it and protecting those rights. And what they do is they just, they do reports, what they see, what's happening. If there's, since we started our moose monitoring, there's no conservation officers in Grand Rapids. But because we have people monitoring what's happening when the moose are coming out in the winter to lick the salt and all, the poaching has gone way down. We're starting to see more moose coming up because of the interventions of the guardians. We have cameras hidden in the bush and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, we know what's going on out there. And we've actually been able to, get a couple of poachers busted. The commercial fishery is, the biggest industry in Grand Rapids. We have 97 active commercial fishermen. That's down slightly from before the buyback, but it's still our #1 industry. That's why we are where we are, is because we're fishermen. And the Saskatchewan River, people were pulling lots of fish out of there in the wintertime. There's a little bit of ice that still freezes over. Truckloads of fish were being driven out of there and put on licenses down south. And because the people were Métis and claimed rights, there was nothing that conservation would do about it until our guardians started going out there and documenting. And then we passed a BCR, a law, with the chief and council, and the Fishermen's Co-op was also supportive. The local Métis were supportive, and we closed the river completely under our own authority. We have a big lake, we have other places to fish, and all those people that were coming there, they were approached by our guardians on patrol and saying, hey, did you know that this is closed, and you need to have to go out. The fishermen plowed a road out to the lake to offer them other places to go and fish so that we could protect that fishery. And it worked for 2 years, I think, or 3 years. We closed the river in the wintertime, 3 years. And the first year after that, the commercial fishermen noticed a big increase in the amount of fish that they were catching in the summertime when it opened up. And that was all under our own authority, because the province wouldn't do anything to help us protect our treaty rights. Because the treaty right to fish and the treaty right to moose are not worth anything if there are no fish and there are no moose. So we started working on a governance framework so that our guardians, the laws that they are educating people about and encouraging people to comply with, are not BCRs, but the laws of our people that were given to us when we're given this place as our home. How to respect the land, how to conduct yourself in a good way. And these are laws of the Creator, not man-made laws that change. These are the laws that never change. And when we came up with that, we wanted to make it accessible so that we can continue to teach our youth about it. So rather than having a constitutional document with a bunch of pages and Cree words sprinkled throughout, sometimes you'll see a flower design with all those words on there, and it can be interpreted as our Constitution. At the center is Minopamat Siwin, because that's the purpose, right, of why we're here. We want to have a good life. And then all those teachings are surrounding it in that flower that's representative of our beadwork pattern that is familiar to all of us as Mr. Paistigo and Enoa. And that is how we're filling the space that has been created, and that's how we will expand our ability to move to a bigger self-governance. So now that we have that flower, I started calling it our Constitution, because it is the highest law of the land. It's the law of Creator. And beyond just using as a foundation for our Guardians program, we're now using it in our child welfare, in other areas of our governance, so that we can build a strong government and we can be ready, as things move at the community level, at the national level, all these other laws. We are going to have a strong government that is growing and it's going to take over. We're going to make that room for ourselves so that we will be there and we'll be ready and we do things in a good way.
Congrats to the leadership for coming up and answering the question. Our next one is here, and then
now that they're talking about laws, there's only one law we're to follow. I'm the law. Where's my wings? Where are the people to stand behind me? All our people. All my grandfather that suffered from conservation to this day. And in Hardin Lake, Manitoba, my cabin stands to this day where I was raised by the elders to bring this law forward. You're all bound by this law internationally. Can you hold this up? The people coming onto these lands are all bound by this law internationally. You see those 3 red lines? Those are with us, the people. And then the first red line is the wampum belt. The second is the pipe laws. I have crowned the Thunderbird's nest. That's the crown of all crowns. When they say crown land, be more specific because we have a crown as well. But we don't look at ourselves as above anybody because we're in the circle here. And all these people are bound by our law internationally. The white stripe is Noah's Ark Treaty. It is a treaty. It is not a boat. And the yellow line is
Think about people who live off the land. A lot of people say you can't go back to live off the land. But an elder, his name was Charlie Osborne, told me, yes, you can. Yes, you can. But what's stopping us, he said, is the laws of the province, the laws of Canada. Okay? That's what's stopping us. He said, I'm answering. It's a high keyword. He said, I'm answering me, be sovereign. He said, Maui means to be sovereign. Those are the keywords I learned. Who we are actually. But we lost that for 151 years since the signing of our treaties. Because in 1880, Queen Victoria declared an amendment to the Indian Act of 1880 that we, the bands of Canada, yeah, how it says that? The Indians of Canada. We are not Indians of Canada. We have our own territory. We have our own nation. In each of these nations, there was Nehewik, which is part of me. And the Michigan is also part of Nehewik, which is the greater nation right across from Alberta, right to James Bay, right down to the United States. That's the nation. But right now, we are under the control. It depends on the it depends on Canada. I told you what I saw with the Chicago. It don't depend on the Canada, it don't depend on the That's where our thought is. It's Canada. And we follow their laws, including the province, their laws. Take a look at Section 88 of the Indian Act. It says, okay, all laws, provincial laws, will be followed from time to time. Now, take a look back. What are these things? What are these laws? Natural Resources Act. About your treaty rights, about fishing, about hunting, about gathering. All that is in there. Now we go back to the violations of treaty rights. We've got Manitoba Hydro violating your lands, your rivers, your fish, your beavers, your hunting, your medicine gathering. That is the violations of treaty rights. And in there it says Hydropower Act, okay? Water Power Act. And that those laws belongs to the province. It allows Manitoba Hydro
My battery's
and
dying.
the
I gotta shut it down.
to do whatever
Sorry.
they want.